I saw it happen through the glass. He didn't slam the door, didn't raise his voice, just placed his badge, laptop, and one old brass key on Meredith's desk like he was closing a tab at a bar he didn't plan on revisiting. I was the only one in the HR bullpen who noticed his hand linger for half a second on that key, labeled B1 in faded black Sharpie. No one else blinked. Meredith didn't even look up, just clicked her pen and said, "We're flattening unnecessary ops overhead. Turn in all company assets today." She said it like she was reading off a damn receipt. Evan Langston, our ops guy for nearly 15 years, didn't argue, didn't even flinch. He gave a tiny, crooked smile and said, "It's all yours now," then walked out the same way he came in. Quiet, invisible, like every spreadsheet he ever fixed at 2 a.m. I should have said something, but what do you say when a man leaves like that? When his silence says, "You'll see? Hey, if you're still listening, do us a quick favor and tap that like button, maybe even subscribe. 97% of you forget to, but it means the world to the folks behind the channel. And trust me, you'll want to see how this plays out, because I was there for what came next. At the time, I was just Emma from compliance, the girl who flagged audit errors and got told to lighten up by executives who never read the fine print. I had no power, no title, just a back office view of the storm Meredith was about to unleash. What no one upstairs remembered, hell, what I barely remembered, was the mess from 8 years ago during the Trico merger. Back when the company's legal team was scrambling to secure the new HQ lease, and the previous CFO basically begged Evan to handle it off record, while the documents shuffled between 3 different corporate entities. I remember overhearing bits of it. Something about the building being in limbo, ownership still tied up in escrow, and the risk of losing the location unless someone stepped up fast. Evan did, but not like they expected. He set up an LLC, signed the lease under Holt and Langston Properties. A temporary fix, they said. Legal promise to clean it up later. Spoiler, they never did. He paid the property taxes through our op account, kept the utilities running, handled the inspections, always quiet, always precise. I only found out years later because he once emailed me a copy of a fire compliance certificate, and the building owner listed was not us. It was his damn LLC. But like everyone else, I forgot. Until that Friday morning. Until he handed over that key with the calm of a man who wasn't being fired, but untethered. And Meredith? God, she thought she was on a roll. After Evan left, she cracked her knuckles and laughed. One less dinosaur in the system. She actually said that. I remember staring at her, suddenly cold all over, because Evan wasn't a dinosaur. He was the bedrock, and she just dug out the wrong stone. It would take 3 days for her to realize the floor beneath her was already crumbling. But I saw it first. The way Evan walked out like he still owned the place. Turns out he kind of did. It started with a post-it note. Pink, slanted handwriting from the old CFO that just said, "Fix this. Urgent. Use Langston if you need." I remember it because I scanned it for records and thought, use him? Like a wrench? Back then, we were neck-deep in the Trico merger and everything was chaos. Tax IDs in conflict, vendor payments frozen, and most importantly, the HQ lease dangling by a thread because no one knew which corporate entity was allowed to sign it. They kept saying, "We'll sort it out later," except later never came. The building owner had given us 72 hours. No valid lessee, no occupancy. Legal didn't want to risk litigation, and the CFO, Gregory Reed, the kind of guy who wore cologne that smelled like prenups, just wanted it gone from his inbox. So he called Evan. I was on that call. Speakerphone in the old conference room with the broken thermostat. Gregory barked, "I don't care how you do it. Just don't lose me that damn building. Use your little side business or whatever. Get it done." And Evan, always polite, always unflappable, said, "Understood. I'll take care of it." By Monday morning, the lease was signed. Not by Trico, not by the parent company, but by Holt and Langston Properties LLC. A quiet little real estate shell Evan had formed years ago when helping his brother-in-law rent out a strip mall. He added one line under special conditions. Lessee retains full management authority unless superseded by formal reassignment documents signed by both parties. That document? Never filed. And over the years, everyone just forgot. But Evan didn't. He filed every property tax statement himself, paid through the operations account like any other invoice. He handled the building's compliance reports, elevator inspections, fire alarms, HVAC service renewals. He was the guy you emailed when the third-floor toilets backed up or the roof started leaking during spring thaw. And no one ever asked why it was always Evan. Not facilities, not legal, not finance, because the place ran. He even listed his LLC as the property maintenance contact on the fire marshal's paperwork. I helped him upload it once. He looked over and said, "Make sure that PDF goes in the shared drive under lease, active." I nodded, never gave it another thought. And maybe that's the part that stings now. How easily we all dismissed what he was doing. He never bragged, never lorded it over us. He just kept the lights on while we built our little sandcastles above ground. I wonder if he felt bitter when Meredith called him non-critical. Probably not in the way we'd expect. Evan's the kind of man who doesn't waste words. He waits, like tree roots under concrete, quiet, patient, and eventually catastrophic. By the time they realized what that old brass key unlocked, the rot had already spread too deep, and all those files, the paper trail, they weren't forgotten. They were waiting. Monday started weird. The coffee machine was cold. Not broken, just off. Which was strange, because facilities usually had it humming by 7:30. Then people started trickling in complaining their badges weren't working. Not everyone, just a random handful of us. I had to wait at the front desk while security manually keyed me in like it was 2009. Then Meredith showed up. She stormed past me like she'd just swallowed a lemon, heels clipping hard against the tile. I heard her mutter, "Where the hell is Todd?" Todd being head of facilities. Only he hadn't logged into Slack. No one from his team had. Our internal ticketing system for maintenance was showing unresolved requests stacked 3 high with 0 response. At 8:12 a.m., Meredith fired off the first email to IT Legal Facilities. Subject, Security Transition. Who currently holds the master override and security code access for the building? Please confirm today. No reply. Not in 10 minutes. Not in an hour. By noon, she was pacing. At 12:47, the first package came back from FedEx, labeled Return to Sender. Our building was marked as undeliverable. Meredith blamed the courier. Until Claire, the new admin who replaced Evan's old assistant, stepped out to get some air. She came back holding a sheet of paper like it was radioactive. Bright orange. Bold black letters. Notice to vacate, breach of lease. Taped to the front entrance. And under the bold header, in all caps, lessee has failed to comply with Section 8B of contractual agreement. Premises must be vacated within 72 hours. Meredith yanked it out of Claire's hand. Her lips curled like she was going to laugh, but it came out as a scoff. Some prank. We've had squatters do crap like this before. But there was a number. And a name. Filed by Holt and Langston Properties, LLC. Signed. Notarized. Stamped by the damn county. That's when Meredith emailed Evan. Just his name in the subject line. Is this your doing? I saw it go out. I was 2 seats over. She didn't BCC. Rookie mistake. And then we waited. 3 minutes. Nothing. 10 minutes. Still nothing. 1 hour. Inbox. Dead silent. She forwarded it again. This time adding, "This must be a misunderstanding. We need to resolve this before legal escalates." Still no answer. That's when her fingers started tapping the desk. She pulled up old facility contracts and tried to find a number. Evan's cell had already been disconnected. And the cherry on top. Someone from legal pinged the thread. "Hey Meredith, can you confirm who technically holds the lease on file? We're not seeing the renewal signed in our database." She didn't reply to that one. Just stared at the orange notice, folded in half on her desk like it was radioactive. I don't think she believed it yet. Not really. Not until the next morning when we couldn't get past the lobby at all. But even then, she kept calling it a glitch. She didn't understand. This wasn't a glitch. It was the beginning of an audit she didn't even know she was part of. Wednesday morning felt like a joke. Not the funny kind, more like the kind where the punchline has teeth. I showed up at 8:05 with a latte in one hand and my keycard in the other, only for the little green light to flash red. 3 times. No beep, no click, just that dead silence of rejection. At first, I thought maybe IT was doing updates again. They never tell us. But then I turned around and saw Alan from finance standing there too, holding his badge in the air like it was broken. Behind him, a cluster of confused faces piled up. Marketing, admin, even that overcaffeinated guy from sales who always came in early to grind. None of US could get in. The cleaning crew was stuck in the lobby too, wheeling carts of supplies they never got to use. By 8:20, people were on phones. By 8:30, HR was panicking. By 9 o'clock, legal was in full scramble mode. The servers hiccuped at 9:12 a.m. sharp. Power didn't go out, just connection. Slack died. Email froze. Client access portals locked us out. 20 full minutes. Dead air. Then everything flickered back on, except no one could explain why it went down in the first place. Meredith tried to play calm, but her voice had this high-pitched edge to it when she said, "It's obviously a system sync issue. IT's probably rolling over server credentials." I was on the internal compliance Slack when the CEO, Daniel Chambers himself, popped in unannounced. No greeting, just a message at 9:44. "Legal, call me now." All caps. No emoji, just fury. 5 minutes later, he was in the war room with Meredith, legal, and half the IT team, slamming the table and saying things like, "What do you mean we don't have the lease?" I heard the tale end through the glass. Legal saying they found something in the archives, a scanned document from 8 years ago, tucked under an outdated vendor contract. It was a lease agreement. Master leaseholder, Holt and Langston LLC. Authorized signatory, Evan Langston. Meredith blinked. "Wait, that's Evan's last name. Is this current?" Legal nodded. No termination document. No reassignment. No override clause was ever filed. That's when she turned pale. And she whispered it. Not to anyone in particular. Just under her breath like she was trying to rewind the last week. "Did we just fire our landlord?" No one answered. I don't think they knew how. Daniel paced for 20 minutes straight after that, barking into his Bluetooth and demanding that someone fix this goddamn mess before it hits the board. But the problem wasn't a mess. It was a signature. On paper. Signed. Filed. And never voided. Evan hadn't locked us out. We'd locked ourselves in and thrown away the only key. And from the look on Daniel's face when he saw the document, he finally realized the same thing I did that morning when my badge went dead. We weren't just losing access. We'd already lost it. I didn't hear the call itself. I just saw the aftermath. Daniel pacing around his glass office, red in the face, veins doing a little performance across his temple. He had one hand clenched around his phone like it owed him money, and the other was stabbing the air like he was trying to swat a ghost. Meredith sat frozen outside, glued to her laptop, pretending to triage, while legal scrambled through half a decade of misfiled building records. IT had already confirmed that the badge deactivations weren't internal. They couldn't override anything. Whatever system was running the building access, Evan had the keys. Literal and digital. Then Daniel slammed his office door so hard the frame rattled and shouted, "Get me his number. Now." 2 minutes later, he was calling Evan Langston from a blocked line, pacing and muttering, "He's bluffing. He has to be bluffing." And then, finally, Evan answered. Langston. Calm. Flat. Like he was answering a dinner reservation. Daniel went straight in. "Why the hell is there an eviction notice on my office door?" There was a pause. I was standing just outside, pretending to refill my water bottle, so I caught the shift. Daniel's shoulders stiffened like he'd just been spoken to slowly, like a toddler being taught fire is hot. Then he repeated, in a mocking tone, "Clause 8B? Really?" Evan must have replied, because Daniel's nostrils flared. "Non-payment voids tenant rights?" he snapped. "You're bluffing." And then came Evan's reply. So sharp, so clean. I swear it left a mark on the glass. "My lawyer's not. He drafted it." Click. That was it. He hung up. Daniel stood there, blinking, phone still to his ear like he couldn't believe the call ended without a negotiation. That's when it hit him. There was no bluff. There was only the contract. I heard later from someone in legal that Clause 8B had been sitting in the original lease since day one, tied to a management agreement that no one renewed. The moment Evan was fired and the monthly operations transfer stopped, the clause kicked in like a legal landmine. Automatic breach. Automatic void. You could almost respect the simplicity of it. No explosions. No threats. Just a quiet trapdoor beneath their feet. I saw Daniel later that afternoon, leaning against the boardroom table like it had betrayed him. Eyes glazed, tie half loosened, muttering to Meredith. He was always just there. I didn't even think he mattered. And Meredith, voice barely above a whisper, said, apparently, he mattered more than all of us. It was the first honest thing she'd said all week. They didn't just fire a guy. They erased the one person who knew where the bones were buried. And he didn't have to raise hell. He just pointed to the map. I was called in for minutes, which really meant to take notes while the world burns. The emergency board meeting had that scent. Panic masked in cologne, fresh suits over flop sweat. They'd crammed 12 people into a room meant for 8, and the AC hadn't kicked in yet, so it felt like hell with complimentary seltzer. Daniel sat at the head of the table, jaw locked like he was chewing on a lawsuit. Meredith stood stiffly near the screen, clutching her laptop like it might save her. The board members looked restless. Half of them already knew this wasn't going to be a typical cleanup session. Let's get ahead of this, Meredith started, voice brittle. It's a simple lease miscommunication. The situation with Mr. Langston is temporary and, frankly, exaggerated. Exaggerated. That was Vice Chair Lively, sharp as ever. Are you saying the eviction notice is fake? No, I'm saying it was preventable. The lease terms were outdated, and we're working on renegotiating. There is no lease. That came from legal. Sheila, in her usual black blazer, looking like someone who hadn't slept. Evans LLC, Holt and Langston, still holds the master agreement. The renewal was never signed, and the clause regarding management voids the tenancy upon operational termination. That happened Friday. Dead silence. Daniel leaned forward. What do you mean the renewal was never signed? Sheila didn't flinch. It was drafted, sitting in Evans' folder. But HR terminated him before routing it through legal. We found the unsigned copy in his shared drive. I watched Meredith's face flicker, first confusion, then that too-late realization. The dots connected themselves, like watching a spider's web snap under a drop of water. She opened her mouth, then closed it. It was supposed to be routine, she said, softer now. Ops consolidation. He wasn't marked as a leaseholder in the HRIS system. Lively narrowed her eyes. But he was the leaseholder. And the building. Technically, Sheila said, tapping her file, we're trespassing. The words landed like a gut punch. No lease meant no legal right to the space. No right to access the data center tucked into the lower floor. No right to the compliance binders in the locked archives. No right to the payroll files or servers that lived inside a structure now fully under someone else's control. Someone they fired with a brass key and a generic exit form. Daniel looked like he was going to explode, but not outward. Inward. That kind of implosion you only see in people who've realized they can't unfuck what's already been shattered. His mouth opened twice before he managed. You're telling me our files, our systems, our client data, it's all in a building we don't legally occupy? Sheila nodded once. And if Evan decides to change the locks? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. He already had. That's when Meredith cracked. Not loud. Just a tiny tremble in her voice as she whispered, I didn't know. No one told me he's still. Because you didn't ask, Lively said coldly. You assumed. You cleared out the guy who held the ground we stand on because he didn't fit your org chart. The room felt suddenly smaller. Daniel stood, paced the length of the table, then stopped dead. What's our exposure? Sheila looked down at her notes. If he pushes it, millions. not counting the litigation from clients if they find out our data centers in legal purgatory. Meredith sat down. Slowly, quietly, the same woman who snapped, "Turn in all assets," like she was swiping crumbs off a counter, now looked like a ghost at her own funeral. No one yelled. No one needed to. The silence was worse. The offer came the next morning, wrapped in faux diplomacy and frantic desperation. Daniel had his assistant reach out first, like this was some casual reconnection, not a white-knuckled attempt to unring a fire alarm with legal teeth. She left a message on Evan's voicemail, something hollow like, "The CEO would love to connect for a quick discussion regarding ongoing operations." Translation: "We screwed up and need you to put the building back in our hands before the board hangs us with Ethernet cables." Evan didn't answer. Not immediately. Not even that day. He waited. Long enough for the panic to boil, for the cracks to widen. Word was already spreading. Someone from sales mentioned a client refusing to sign a renewal until the data access issues were resolved. IT was trying to migrate backups to cloud storage overnight, but legal wasn't convinced that covered our compliance responsibilities. I passed Daniel in the hall that afternoon. He looked aged, sunken. His blazer was wrinkled. His usual posture slumped, like someone who'd just watched his retirement glide out the back door. Finally, on Thursday morning, Evan called back. Daniel took it in his office, but the tone leaked through the glass like smoke. Polite, calm. Every so often, Daniel would interrupt with a pleading, "Look, Evan," or, "We both know this wasn't intentional," followed by silence so thick it almost had mass. When he hung up, he called Meredith in. 5 minutes later, they emerged, faces like statues. Meredith looked wrecked. Daniel's tie was undone, and he was holding a yellow legal pad like it was a resignation letter. The terms? Evan had declined the consulting retainer they'd offered, $15K a month plus NDA clauses. Instead, he said, "I'm considering other tenants." Other tenants, as in people who'd already been inside the building. We found out later that week that one of our competitors, a tech-adjacent logistics firm with a bigger cash war chest and fewer legal entanglements, had already toured the space. The kicker? They'd reached out to Evan directly, through his LLC website. Turns out, he'd quietly activated the leasing inquiries page 3 days before he was fired. Domain updated. Metadata scrubbed. The man had receipts going back months. When Daniel asked what it would take to get the lease back, just the lease, mind you, not even Evan's operational support, Evan didn't flinch. He named a number, $1.2 million per quarter. Daniel apparently choked. Asked if that came with facilities support. Evan replied, "No, that's just rent." "And if we refuse?" Daniel asked. There was a pause. Then Evan said, "Then I'll let the other offer go through." They were willing to pay more. That was the moment Daniel realized Evan hadn't just walked away with the keys. He'd walked away with the leverage. The building, the systems, the compliance, the physical proof of the company's existence. And he no longer needed them. They needed him, desperately. Evan didn't scream, didn't threaten. He just renamed the terms of their survival and waited. It arrived on Friday morning, 9:03 a.m. sharp. A matte black envelope, hand-delivered by a courier in mirrored sunglasses who said nothing, just handed it to the front desk and left without waiting for a signature. Legal flagged it within minutes. Daniel and Meredith were pulled into the boardroom. I followed because at that point, everyone stopped pretending I was just compliance. I was the unofficial chronicler of the meltdown. Inside the envelope was a single thick packet, embossed and notarized, sealed with the kind of quiet finality you feel more than see. Evan's lawyer, someone from a firm we couldn't afford even before the board started bleeding money, had delivered exactly what we all feared: a termination of tenancy notice, effective immediately, citing breach of Clause 8B and forfeiture of access rights. Itemized invoices, overdue facility management costs dating back 6 months, HVAC, elevator inspections, emergency lighting, generator servicing. All paid by Evan. All billed now. Total? $183,422.97. Due in 14 days. Security footage. Burned to a USB stick and printed frame by frame on glossy paper. It showed Daniel, our CEO, storming out to the front entrance, grabbing the orange eviction notice, cursing, then ripping it off the door like a frat kid tearing down a midterm flyer. He crumpled it, threw it on the ground, and walked away. On the footage, the timestamp blinked. Wednesday, 6:52 a.m., direct violation of county posting laws. Tampering with legal signage. But the piece de resistance? A registered letter, time-stamped and dated 6 weeks before Evan's termination. Signed by Meredith. Her signature in blue ink, right beside the clause that voided the tenant rights if facilities management was reassigned or eliminated without 30-day notice. It was a standard renewal clause, a formality, one she hadn't read before signing. And with that signature, she'd effectively handed Evan the fuse and lit it herself. The board went deathly quiet. Not angry, not surprised, just still, like they'd finally accepted what we all saw coming 3 moves ago. Meredith tried to speak once. Her voice cracked. This wasn't malicious. I didn't know. But Lively cut her off. You didn't ask. Daniel didn't defend her. He just stared at the letter. I think it finally clicked that every safeguard they thought they had, every assumption about who mattered and who didn't, was built on someone else's patience. The board voted before lunch. Unanimous. Meredith was removed. No speech. No thank you. Just a closed laptop and an escort to her car. She passed me on the way out. Didn't look at me. Didn't look at anyone. She left the same way Evan had. Only difference? He left with the building. She left with nothing. And Evan, he never once raised his voice. He didn't torch the company. He didn't file lawsuits or leak anything to the press. He simply gave them the paperwork. They struck the match. All he did was hand them the mirror. It was exactly 31 days later when they invited him back. Same boardroom, same table, but the air was different now. It didn't buzz with tension. It hummed with surrender. Everyone was early. Daniel wore his best suit, freshly pressed. Lively was already sipping coffee, face unreadable. Legal sat stone straight, flanked by 2 junior analysts who looked like they'd just watched their careers age 10 years in a month. And then Evan walked in. No entourage, no briefcase, just him in a tailored blazer and jeans, looking 10 pounds lighter and 10 years sharper. He didn't shake hands, didn't sit until they gestured. Daniel opened the meeting like it was cordial, like they hadn't spent 4 weeks untangling operations from a building they technically weren't allowed to be in. We'd like to discuss options to purchase the property outright, he said, like he was ordering from a menu. To simplify things for both parties. Evan leaned back. No smile. No hostility either. Just that unreadable calm he wore better than any of us ever noticed. He didn't speak right away. Let them sit in it. Then he reached into his jacket, pulled out a small brass key. The same one Meredith had scoffed at weeks ago, and set it on the table. The sound it made was so soft, it might have been missed if we weren't all holding our breath. I'll lease it to you, he said, voice even. But I'm no longer a director. He looked Daniel straight in the eyes. I'm your landlord. Not a smirk. Not a jab. Just fact. Daniel blinked. Lively's lips parted slightly, then closed. No one objected. No one argued. The silence wasn't shocked anymore. It was reverent. Behind Evan, freshly mounted on the wall where the old company logo used to hang, was a new plaque. Sleek brushed metal. Backlit. Holt and Langston Business Plaza. A name they'd ignored for years. A man they'd dismissed as background noise. Now, every piece of mail, every legal filing, every visitor badge would carry his legacy. Not because he fought for it. Not because he burned bridges. Because he waited. Because he documented. Because when they pushed him out, they didn't realize they were stepping off a ledge he'd marked clearly, on paper, in ink, with receipts. Evan didn't need to gloat. He didn't need a speech. The building spoke for him. He stood, adjusted his jacket, and nodded politely to the room. I'll have my attorney forward the lease terms, he said. You'll find them quite reasonable, compared to eviction court. Then he walked out. Not fast. Not slow, just steady. I stayed behind, just for a second, watching the board stare at that key like it was a loaded weapon. That's when I realized it wasn't revenge. It was real estate, and Evan Langston owned every square foot of it.